As United States attorneys and federal prosecutors, we focus our attention on our chief responsibility in the drug area, and that is putting drug dealers in jail. But we are slowly realizing that the real solution to this drug problem in our country is drug awareness and education. As a personal comment, in 1984, last year, I came to this conviction as a result of a prosecution that we had in Hot Springs, Arkansas, where the entire community had been lulled into the feeling that cocaine usage was socially acceptable, and because of lax law enforcement, that there was really no problem in that. We solved the problem with lax law enforcement because we prosecuted the governor's brother, lawyers, doctors, and housewives as well who were caught up in cocaine. I felt good about that result, but I was also aware that the problem of becoming socially acceptable, that it was all right to do, that problem had not been solved in our state. Our governor did not help the problem any when he refused an extradition of a drug dealer to the state of New York, and he made the comment that the drug laws in New York were too severe. Well, I don't think this sent the right message to the people of our country that drugs are a real problem and that laws have to be severe. Well, that's when I came to the realization that education was the long-term solution. Robert Stutman, our next speaker, realized this long before I did. He came to this realization many years ago as special agent in charge of the New York field office of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Mr. Stutman is involved in putting dealers in jail, but he is also involved in drug education. He has spoken to hundreds of civic, parents, and teachers groups on this problem and encouraged the development of drug education programs. Mr. Stutman is a native of Providence, Rhode Island, a graduate of Providence College. He has served with the Central Intelligence Agency. He was appointed in 1971 as chief of the International Training Division of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Then in 1976, he became director of the Office of Congressional Affairs of the DEA. For the past 6 years, he has served as special agent in charge of the Boston field office of the DEA. And then this year, he was appointed, and his cup really began to overflow when he was assigned to New York as the SAC in charge of the New York field office. Join me in welcoming Mr. Robert Stutman.
Thank you. I'd like to speak to you for the next few minutes about my personal involvement with drug abuse, and a little more honing it in a little more specifically, drug abuse in kids. And let me start out by telling you what I believe are the three most dangerous words that I have ever heard when it comes to the issue of kids and drug abuse, or drug abuse in general. Those words are not heroin or cocaine or LSD. Those words are very simply, not my kid. If I were to pick three words that have probably killed more young people in this country on the issue of kids and drugs, it is those three words, not my kid. Now let me for a couple of minutes share with you some numbers, and frankly I know numbers are very boring and I'm sure you've had them stuck upon you, but I think it's important that we all come from the same plate when we talk about what's really happening in this country when it talks about drugs. According to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, about 60% of our teenagers have occasionally tried grass, about 16% have tried cocaine, about 14% have tried LSD, and about 12% have tried PCP. There was a very interesting study done in New York State not too long ago that looked at drug use in the state of New York. And the one figure I will share with you from that study that really struck me as the most important was that drug use on a per capita basis in the state of New York was highest in Westchester County, was second highest in Nassau County, was third highest in Rockland County. Now, for those of you who are not from the state of New York, you will realize that if you took a per capita income chart and laid it beside the drug use chart in the state of New York, you would see that drug use and per capita income matched almost exactly. So for those of us who thought that drug use amongst kids is a problem of the ghetto, we now know that it is no longer a problem in the ghetto. In November of 1984, Governor Dukakis of Massachusetts released what is now considered to be probably the best single statewide study of drug use in high schools in the country. He did it for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. There were a number of different numbers in there that were important. I will share 2 or 3 with you that I think are particularly important. Number one, on a per capita basis in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, drug use was heaviest in communities of from 10 to 20,000 people. Higher than in communities of 100,000 people or over, and I think there's an important message in that. Secondly, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, 26% of our high school seniors have occasionally used cocaine. 1 out of 4 have used the drug that I personally believe is probably the most addicting drug available today in the United States, and that to me is professionally very scary. And then the third number that I think should affect all of us is that 28% of the students in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts used an illegal drug, not including alcohol, at age 12 or below. Somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of our kids used an illegal drug, not including alcohol, in elementary school. And I think that's the issue that you and I, as adults and law enforcement people, have to look at. Many times I get asked, how come as an agent or an agent in charge of DEA, you spend so much time involved with prevention and working with school systems and communities? And I will tell you, I think it is for a very important reason, and I think every person in this room who is a U.S. attorney or involved with law enforcement has the same reason. You and I have a special obligation to deal with communities to point out that the attitude of "not my kid" is indeed a killing attitude. Because very few people, other than law enforcement and parents groups, are going to have the guts to stand up and say that. There is truly a wall of denial existing in many communities today in the United States of America. About 3 years ago, I was in a very nice community called Acton, Mass., which, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is upper middle income personified. And I was sitting in a high school, talking to a small group of kids about 14 years of age, and one girl came into the room, and she didn't come into the room, she floated into the room. Her name was Stacy. She was stoned on Quaaludes at age 14. Stacy had the uniform of the day on for Acton, Mass., which was a Calvin Klein top, Sassoon jeans, and Frye boots. Did not come from a poor family. Stacy came over and sat down, and we started talking, and it was obvious she was whacked out of her tree. And we had a short conversation, and then I asked her a very simple question. I said, Stacy, why do you do drugs? She gave me an answer 3 years ago that to the day I die, I don't think I'll ever forget it, because it was so honest and so simple, it was scary. I said, Stacy, why do you do drugs? She said, because, Mr. Stutman, nobody's ever told me why not. Now, you think about that for a minute. Who is telling our kids why not? According to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, the average age for first drug use in the United States of America is age 12 and a half. I think that we as adults are asking our kids at somewhere between 11 and 13 to make what I believe at that age is the most important decision of their life. And that is not, do I go off for football or soccer or field hockey, or do I take Algebra 1 or geometry? That decision is, do I become a drug user or not? And we are asking our kids to make that decision at about age 12 or 13 with, unfortunately, very little or almost no preparation. It is clear to me that many of our communities in this country are extremely religious. They must be, because they're obviously depending upon divine intervention to come down and save their kids and help them make the right decision, because they're not doing anything else. Now, let me give you a few examples of what I mean by asking them to make that decision and not helping them make it. Let's start off with one of the things that kids always tell me. One of the things I do when I go into a high school is spend time with kids alone, meaning no teachers, no other adults, etc., and try to establish a rapport with them. So they will tell me what they think about the drug use and the drug issue. One of the first questions I ask these kids is, who do you talk to about drugs? It's an important question. Who do you talk to? Who can you talk to? And you say, of course, can you talk to your parents about drugs? And I will tell you, and I have all kinds of cute little answers written down that they give you, but you've heard them all. The majority of our kids say they absolutely cannot talk to their parents about their drug use. Why? My mother would tell me she'd kill me. They'd put me up for adoption. They'd ground me till I was 18. They'd lock me up for life. My parents would kill me. I mean, you get all kinds of answers like that. Let me tell you a synopsis that I admittedly made up, but I think summarizes a great number of the conversations that take place between parents and kids in this country today on the subject of drugs. Now, I used this synopsis, by the way, at a very, very expensive private school in the East, and it was not the private school that Mitch Rosenthal was referring to, it was another one. And I got told by the headmaster, who obviously had a PhD in English, that this is called a dogmatic colloquy. That impressed the hell out of me. I will share the following dogmatic colloquy with you that very often takes place between parents and kids, and it goes like this. Hey, Ma, I smoked a joint, and I'd like to talk about it. Don't you ever use drugs. Why? Because I said so. And that's the end of the conversation that unfortunately takes place today in the United States between parents and kids on the subject of drugs. Most kids can't talk to their parents. So you ask them the second question, can you talk to your teachers? And of course, usually the answer is no. Number one, teachers don't know any more about dope than parents do. But number two, most kids consider their teachers gossips. I don't know if it's true or not. Most kids say to me, when I tell my teacher something about me personally, my teacher goes to the teacher's room, and before you know it, the whole school knows about my problem. So you don't talk to your teachers. So then you ask the basic question, well, if you don't talk to your parents and you don't talk to your teachers, who do you talk to about drugs? Where do you get your information? And of course, the answer is obvious, each other. They have become their own instant experts. And our kids today believe such garbage and such BS to be the truth that if it weren't scary, it would be truly funny. We should have learned in about 1932 a very important thing from Adolf Hitler. And that is, if you tell a lie long enough and hard enough, to a lot of people, that lie becomes the truth. And that's what's happened to our kids today. They truly believe absolute falsehoods about drugs to be the truth, because the only experts that they have consulted with are each other, and they have become their own instant experts. That, I think, is a major issue that we have an obligation to address. We have to be able to get information to our kids in a factual manner. Then we look at the school systems in many communities in the United States. And maybe much of what I will say about school systems does not go for your community. And if it doesn't, you're very lucky. Unfortunately, it is true in many school systems in New England, where I have spent the past 6 years. I think there are two issues that we have to look at in school systems. Number one, many public and private school systems today in the United States tolerate drug use. And in fact, I would tell you that any school system that tolerates drug use, in fact, promotes drug use. Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. Whenever I say that to school superintendents, they get all worked up, start screaming at me. How can you say something like that? Many school systems in the United States, a kid can be in school all day, stoned, whacked out of his tree. And unless that kid is disruptive, that kid will not be dealt with by the system. That kid can sit in class and not blink for 50 minutes, man, go like this when he normally would. Or he can sit and blink 8,000 times when he normally wouldn't for 50 minutes. Unless that kid picks up a chair and throws it at the teacher or swears at her, that kid's allowed to sit there. Well, I would proffer to you, ladies and gentlemen, that that simple incident gives a very clear message to the other 25 kids in class. And it very simply is, hey, man, it must be okay to do drugs because nobody gives a damn. This kid's allowed to sit here stoned and nobody's bothering him. Nobody's confronting him. Nobody's approaching him. And when kids see that incident time after time after time, the message that they get from that incident is very clear. It's okay to do drugs because the system doesn't care. And at the same time, I am certainly not an educator and don't profess to be one. I know that many, if not most, school systems in the United States of America today that start drug education generally start it in the 8th or 9th grade. Now, again, I'm certainly not an educator, but I know that if you are teaching a kid the first factual information that they get about a decision they've already had to make 2 years ago, that information that we're giving them doesn't do a hell of a lot of good. And unfortunately, most school systems still do not teach meaningful factual drug education before age 14. And yet our kids are making that decision at age 12. And I think those are two issues we have to look at. And then the final issue, I think, that is truly one that we as adults have to look at is the issue of the message that kids get in general. According to a number of different studies, by the time your child graduates high school, he or she will have seen 350,000 commercials on television. That is the average kid. According to the National Advertising Council, their own figures, 21% of media commercials are for pharmaceutical products. That means about, if my arithmetic is correct, about 70,000 of those commercials are for pharmaceutical products. Now, what does a pharmaceutical commercial say when you cut out all the glamour and all the other stuff? What does it say, really? It has a very simple message. If you got a problem, take a pill. No matter what your problem is, take a pill. If your problem is headache, heartburn, hemorrhoids, pre-MS, post-MS, whatever your problem is, we got a pill to solve it. And your kid has seen that message from the time he or she is 2 or 3 to the time your kid is 18. So when communities say to me they are shocked that 60% of their kids use drugs, I honestly say to them, I'm shocked that 40% don't. I am shocked that the way we have so predisposed our young kids to become drug users today, that 40% are able to escape through that mire of drug use. And in fact, that's where we are today. And I think, unfortunately, it is something that must be changed. Now, Mitch is 100% right. There are communities, because of parents' groups mostly, that are beginning to turn themselves around and make a difference. But unfortunately, there are not enough communities. One of the reasons I became involved in drug prevention, I will share this incident with you, and frankly, I tell it almost every speech I give. One of the questions I often get is, why do you do what you do? Both for a living and why do you do so much public speaking? I will tell you a true story, and for those of you who know me, as some of the U.S. attorneys in here know me, you will know it. You know it's a true story. In 1967, I was a very young, very crazy agent living in a very nice community called Baltimore County, Maryland. And one day, a friend of mine happened to call me up, and this guy happened to be a lawyer, and I didn't hold that against him. And he said to me, Bob, that's a joke for the lawyers in the room. He said, Bob, would you talk to my son? I think he's screwing around with drugs. I said, look, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a social worker, I'm not a teacher, I'm not the guy to talk to your kid about drugs. Obviously, to make a long story short, he imposed upon our friendship, and I said I'd talk to the kid. Kid came into my office, and the kid's name is Kenny. In the 1967, Kenny was 14 years of age. Kenny was a love child. And I'm sure there are some people in this room who are old enough to remember the love children, but I will describe Kenny for you if you don't remember him. Kenny, at age 14, literally had a hair down to the small of his back. He had 3 strands of rawhide wrapped around his head. He had a rawhide vest, leather pants, and his shoes were sandals that were cut out of a rubber tire. Remember, they used to cut a rubber tire out of the tire, and with a rope stuck up between his toes. He had a string of feathers wrapped around his waist, and I have no idea how he kept them up there. And of course, the bottom line was, unfortunately for me, Kenny smelled like he hadn't taken a bath in about 6 months. But Kenny was a love child, and I always remember that great quote by Malcolm McEwen about the love generation when he said, the problem with the love generation is too many of them killed each other. And if you remember the end of the Haight-Ashbury era, that's exactly what happened. Anyway, Kenny Starr and I started to talk about his drug use and his perceptions of drug use. I will tell you honestly, for the first hour, Kenny and I told each other exactly what we thought of each other. That was the rules. And I'm not sure it's good therapy technique. Mitch might not agree with it, but we said, anything you want to say to me, you can say, and vice versa. I will clean it up because we're on videotape here, but I believe Kenny told me, as far as he was concerned, I was a no-good narc, fascist pig, Gestapo agent, oink, cop, SOB. I mean, every name you've ever heard a law enforcement officer called, this kid screamed at me. Now, in all fairness, at the same time, I told Kenny exactly what I thought of him. And again, cleaning it up, I think I called him a no-good little long-haired pinko who ought to be living over in Russia if that's the way he felt about the United States. Well, we screamed at each other. Finally, after about an hour, we stopped screaming. Kenny and I started to honestly talk about his particular drug usage. Kenny told me that since it was age 14, since age 11, he had smoked grass, smoked hash, used speed, used LSD. Kenny told me that he lived in a nice 4-bedroom colonial, as probably many of the kids you know do. And he'd go up into his bedroom 2 or 3 times a week and close the bedroom door and smoke a bone. He said sometimes his room stunk so bad he thought the house was going to burn down. But his parents never, ever confronted him. And in 1985, I have kids tell me the same thing. Kenny told me he went to school stoned 5 days a week. Never, ever went to school straight. And his teachers never confronted him. And in 1985, kids tell me the same thing. And then during the middle of our conversation, Kenny said the following thing to me that to the day I die, I will never forget. I will tell you exactly what he said, a direct quote. Kenny said to me, man, why don't you get off my goddamn back? I'm not hurting anybody. Leave me alone, man. I'm not hurting anybody. What are you hassling me for? That was a direct quote from this 14-year-old kid. Kenny at age 14 didn't weigh 110 pounds carrying a 10-pound shot put, a classic symptom of methamphetamine or speed use. Kenny at age 14 would never eat a full meal through. His mother said he'd eat a little bit at a time, classic symptom of speed use. Kenny at age 14 would never sleep more than 3 or 4 hours at a time, classic symptom of speed use. Kenny at age 14, as you looked at the pupils of his eyes, they were opened up so wide you could literally not see any color. All you saw was black and white, a classic symptom of speed use. And Kenny at age 14 sat 6 feet away from me and his hand shook so bad he looked like he had cerebral palsy, a classic symptom of speed use. And this kid said to me, "Get off my back, I'm not hurting anybody." Now, of course, as the great Paul Harvey show does, the rest of the story, I will tell you the rest of the story. I had such a marked effect on this kid. I was such an outstanding hero and figure to him that 7 months later, Kenny was found dead in a Greyhound bus station in downtown Baltimore, overdosed from heroin. I happened to be out with the Baltimore Police Department that night, so I saw Kenny about 15 minutes after they found him. And I'm sure, except for maybe a few people in this room who have been police officers, nobody in this room has probably ever seen a heroin overdose. Kenny was laying in the bathroom, his head next to the toilet, his eyes wide open, and the needle was still in his arm, because many heroin addicts die so quickly the spike doesn't come out of their arm before they're dead. And to the day I die, I will never forget at that time that 15-year-old kid laying in that toilet saying to me 7 months before, "Get off my back, I'm not hurting anybody." Now, of course, the sad part about Kenny wasn't that he killed himself. It's that he killed himself and never even knew it. He had no idea what he was doing to himself. Now, I'll tell you, I go into schools today and I look at a group of 1,000 kids. I'm not stupid. I know there are some kids in that 1,000 that are going to do dope no matter what anybody says or does. Christ or Moses or Buddha himself could come down and talk to those kids, and we ain't going to do anything about it. And frankly, I don't go to schools to talk to those kids, really. There is also some kids in school systems that are never going to touch drugs no matter what anybody says or does. And frankly, that may be great, but those aren't the kids I'm really there to see in a school system. What bothers me is the vast majority of those kids are somewhere in between. They don't know what they're going to do. They don't know if they're going to snort coke once. They don't know if they're going to blow grass once. They don't know what they're going to do about drugs. And unfortunately, some of those kids are going to end up killing themselves and not even know they're doing it. And we weren't there to help them. Now, a kid can kill himself in other ways besides, blowing their brains out or physically dying. And let me give you a good example of that. I was in Manchester, New Hampshire High School, Manchester West High School, about a year ago. And a young man came up to me, and a direct quote from him, after we talked for a while, he had been using cocaine for 3 years, 4 or 5 times a week. And he said to me at age 17, he said to me, "Mr. Stutman, I don't remember the last 2 years of my life." Now, you think about that. At age 17, he doesn't remember the last 2 years of his life. That kid is intellectually dead, and I'm not sure he will ever, ever regain consciousness from that death. And that's the issue we have to look at. I'm going to end and read you a little piece of a letter, and if you think I'm kidding, I will show it to anybody who wants to see it afterwards, that I got from a high school girl about a year ago. And I will edit out most of it. I'll just read about 2 or 3 paragraphs to you. This young lady, I think, summarizes the situation far better than any way I could. This was a letter I got from a girl after I was at a high school in Massachusetts, and I'll read a couple of pieces to you. "Dear Mr. Stutman, I wanted to write to you while everything you said was still fresh in my mind. I'm in the 10th grade at such and such school today, and I just turned 16. I was the girl in the red shirt with the long brown hair, and she describes herself, and I remembered her because she spent a good deal of time with me. I will not delete the expletives, so I apologize ahead of time. I will quote directly from her letter. She said, quote, "As I said today, I pretty much have my shit together at this point. In the 8th grade, I took speed, methamphetamine, every single day for almost 8 months. In the 9th grade, I smoked pot every day without fail. Now I drink occasionally, once every 3 weeks or a month, mostly wine, which I enjoyed. I have not touched speed in over a year, and I actually fear it now. It was such a part of me, and that scares me. I wanted to tell you one very important thing. When I was taking speed, my grades sucked, and I was very lonely, although I had many friends and many people who loved me or were concerned. I did not care about my mother, relatives, school, attitude, or appearance. I realized that I was feeling these things, and yet I did not care. When you are heavily into drugs, people, teachers, administrators, friends, and parents can lecture you until you turn blue in the face, and yet you do not hear them." Then I'll skip a paragraph. She goes on to say, quote, "I think what Kendra, who was another girl, said is true. At this point, we have pretty much developed our drug habits and uses. The education should start much earlier since kids are beginning their experimentation much earlier these days. The first time most people smoke pot is in the 7th grade when they arrive at the junior high school. This is when they are first introduced to the easy availability of drugs. This next paragraph I think is a classic. She says, quote, "Our drug education is a poor excuse for education. Facts are thrown at us and are only dealt with on a surface level. We are not permitted to talk about our experiences for fear of what will happen if an administrator or teacher or your parents find out. There is no open discussion of feelings or fears. We listen and they talk. This is wrong, and it is not the way to teach a child what to do when they are faced with the decision to use or to not use a drug. This is a major problem that must be dealt with concern and not the attitude that it is wrong and will ruin your life. At this point, we were not ready to make decisions, and yet we were forced to do so. With a little guidance and caring, perhaps some of us would not be where we are today." That girl was one of the brightest girls I've ever seen, and unfortunately, she is now in a long-term psychiatric hospital. I think what that girl said summarizes the issue that you and I have to look at. It ain't locking up dope peddlers, and it isn't education programs. It's helping a lot of kids who, unless we get involved, won't get the help. Thank you very much.